Welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Cowett, CEO and co-founder of On Frontiers. I'm super excited to welcome you to our webinar today, which is maximizing your small business GovCon success, scaling with limited resources. If that's what you came for, you're in the right place. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got the star of the show with us, Charlie Painter, who I'll be introducing in a bit. But I am Brian, co-founder of On Frontiers, and excited to welcome you. Just a couple notes as we get started. So the first is that we've got a great group here today: business developers, capture managers, growth leaders in the federal space. This webinar is really oriented towards small business pain points. If you are from a large business, though, before you click the leave button, there are going to be, I think, lessons learned here that apply to you in your case. On Frontiers does serve and work with a number of larger customers. As I mentioned, I'll have with me in shotgun Charlie Painter, who will be taking us through some strategies for working with subject matter experts and how he is able to leverage the On Frontiers platform to do so, and do so to compete in a highly competitive marketplace. And so I think that's the real thing that we're going to learn today is how he does that, and what it is, how it works, and why it works. And let's see, some ground rules before we get started. One is we will be sharing this video with the audience after 24 hours after the webinar, so no need to make furious notes during the presentation. Second is that we really want your questions on the content. So we'll be reserving some time at the end, 15 minutes for Q&A. But when they occur to you, just go into the chat and please leave your questions there. We've got Siva from our team, our head of marketing, who will be triaging those questions so we can make sure that they all get answered in this time. Okay. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our expert for this webinar, Charlie Painter. And I'll ask him to kind of expand upon his experience, but I'll also just start with a bit of background. First, starting with how I met Charlie. I met Charlie actually indirectly through the On Frontiers platform, as I was reaching out to subject matter experts to learn about the federal space. His name popped up. And I think this was around 4 or 5 years ago that I met Charlie. And at the time, he was working with ICS Federal, who became a customer of On Frontiers. And Charlie was able to leverage our platform for a period of 2 years, working with us there. And we both, I think, learned a lot through that process and formed a great relationship. Charlie is also very knowledgeable on the ecosystem of federal contracting. He's the president of CBDA, Capital Business Development Association. We are proud to be partners of CBDA. They do a lot of great work to support small businesses in the federal contracting ecosystem. He has most recently moved on to a business called Censure, where he is the VP of Business Development there. Charlie is one of the most experienced business development and capture leaders that I've met in the space. I think it's 39 years of experience working in this topic area, hundreds of captures, supported a range of roles: systems integrators, DoD, FedCiv, environmental. So I think we've got the right person here to help us understand how to leverage On Frontiers and leverage subject matter experts. Charlie, just turning that over to you, would you just mind expanding on your background? And also, what is your connection to this topic about helping small businesses maximize their opportunities in the federal space?
Well, as you mentioned, Brian, over the last 21 years of the 39, I've been a capture manager, and I have supported large systems integrators, SAIC, for example. A couple mid-cap companies. I'm supporting a mid-cap right now at Censure, and previously at Centel Corporation before they were acquired by Vectrus, now V2X. And I've worked for a number of small businesses as well. So I've been in a capture management role across the vista of company sizes. Also work for a wide variety of socioeconomic categories, 8A companies, veteran-owned small businesses, hub zones. So I've got a pretty good flavor of the landscape of federal contracting and some of the challenges that exist. Now, as you mentioned, I've been an On Frontiers user for 2.5 years, and I'm really excited to share our experience with the platform and our successes with the platform because over time at ICS, it became a real mainstay of our capture activities. So I'm looking forward to share that today.
That's terrific, Charlie. Thanks again for joining. I think to start us out on the topic, it probably would be most useful if you could kind of talk at a high level of some of the primary challenges you see for small government contractors as they're competing in the marketplace.
Well, yeah, over the last 5.5 years, I've seen some changes and I see some trends. First is increased competition within the small business arena of federal contracting. I have seen NASA procurements, I've seen HHS procurements, I've seen DHS procurements with 40 or 50 more small business proposals submitted for a relatively small acquisition, less than $10 million. But it's a very crowded field out there, and it's getting more crowded as time goes on. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's happening, but it's a very, very crowded environment today as opposed to where it was 10 years ago. I think part of this is due to the increased number of small business set-aside opportunities that are out there, but it is a saturated market. And as a result of that saturation, small businesses absolutely have to figure out a way to differentiate themselves from their competition, because otherwise you've got 50 proposals submitted to a NASA opportunity. You're lost in that stack unless you can differentiate yourself and be brought to the top of that stack and be looked at once, twice, maybe even 3 times for a potential win. And that's where On Frontiers comes in, and we'll talk more about that. You got to differentiate yourself, but it's got to be real differentiation. These differentiators have to deal with specific customer requirements, specific hot buttons that they have, problems they may have had with an existing incumbent. You got to figure out a way to tap into this information. And there are a number of ways, but we'll talk today later on about how we've done it with On Frontiers. But again, you've got to set yourself up differently than your competitors. And the way to do that is through subject matter expert information. You got to be able to attract strong teaming partners. In the small business environment, teaming is extremely important, and finding the right teammates is equally important. And there's a competition there as well, because if you're looking for a strong teammate, guess what? 3 or 4 or 5 other primes are also looking at that company as a potential teammate. So not only do you have to differentiate yourself from the government, you have to differentiate yourself from other companies so that you can capture these strong teaming partners. We live in a world of category management, and as a result, oftentimes small businesses are getting in line to try to join with large companies on large IDIQ or GWAC bids. So again, you have to differentiate yourself from other small businesses vying for a position supporting a Booz Allen or a CACI or an SAIC or a Mantech. You've got to look different, and you've got to be able to provide clear articulation as far as what you bring to a teaming situation for that large company. I can tell you from experience, years ago at SAIC, we were bidding a large IDIQ contract within the intelligence community, and from 6 o'clock in the morning, literally, until 6 o'clock at night, every 30 minutes, we were interviewing small businesses as far as whether or not we wanted to determine whether or not we wanted to bring them on our team or not. And it amazed me that when you talk to them about value proposition, what is your value proposition? What do you bring to the team? Virtually all of them didn't have one. They all looked the same. It was very frustrating for us, and I'm sure it was equally frustrating to them. But again, we'll talk a little bit today about how On Frontiers can help you in that scenario as well. The last item that I'll mention, as a small business, it's extremely important to be able to penetrate high trust insider communities. Now, what do I mean by that? Those of you on the call today that have bid work in Huntsville, Alabama, or Charleston, South Carolina, are very, very familiar with insider communities. Very difficult areas to break into if you're not there in Huntsville or Charleston. If you don't have customer relationships there, or more importantly, relationships with companies within those areas. If you've ever bid U.S. Coast Guard work, again, another closed community or an insider community, you've got to find out a way to pierce that veil so that you can develop relationships with customers in those environments and then also with companies operating in those environments as well. And once again, On Frontiers can provide a key in doing that.
That's terrific, Charlie. And we're going to come back to and give you an opportunity to kind of expand upon how you've used On Frontiers to address some of these challenges. But before we do that, I did want to switch gears for a minute, especially for those who are kind of new to On Frontiers and haven't used our tool and maybe are kind of discovering that through this webinar, and just give you kind of a brief overview of what we do. We're not going to go take you through a demo, but just at a high level, what is it? And, I want to start there with the why we decided to focus on this problem to start out with. And that takes me back around 5 years ago, around the time that I met Charlie for the first time. I met a lot of other BD and capture professionals in this space. And I was, an outsider. I was not I had never been a capture manager, but I was just impressed with a number of things. One is just the pain points that Charlie articulated were shared by a lot of other professionals in this area. That BD and capture managers needed to make very critical decisions very early in the process in order to successfully win an opportunity with the federal government. Who to partner with, who to propose on your team, whether to prime or sub, what are the win themes, how should we price this? Those are very critical fundamental decisions that in our experience have really driven wins or losses and real revenue that has been experienced or not experienced as a BD and capture manager. And, in thinking through those decisions, it was also apparent like how hard it is to access the knowledge that you really need to make those decisions. And it's not necessarily that you need a number of Nobel Prize winners, but you need individuals that have specific experience working with a specific federal agency, an organization, a prime, that are connected to the business opportunities that you're seeking, and that the knowledge that they have through their experience is not something you can access very well through Google or finding people on LinkedIn or other channels. And so, at that point, kind of, I hypothesized that we could build a successful expert network model in which we did the hard work and the legwork of inventorying those valuable professionals and vet them as a community and made them available to the ecosystem of federal contractors so that they could tap their knowledge on demand without a lot of work. So fast forward, it has been quite a journey, but we have had the chance to work with 150 government contractors through this time, and we've built up a very large expert network of 75,000 subject matter experts 17,000 of which have been specifically vetted for federal expertise. And we facilitated over 10,000 knowledge connections on federal topics throughout this ecosystem. We're working with some of the it's kind of the largest government contractors, and we have a specific value prop for those. But we're also working with many smaller and mid-sized federal contractors, helping them punch above their weight. So quick tour of how it works. In a nutshell, if you're interested, we're happy to give you a demo and take you through the product and the platform, and we'll have some information at the end of this webinar about how to do that and take that next step. But in a nutshell, we strive on Frontiers to just take all the pain out of finding and accessing and working with the right subject matter expert for your deal. So you can then have a way to differentiate your proposal and make fact-based decisions on whether to bid or not to bid and how to approach. And so the process is you go to our platform, request an expert, you get matched with subject matter experts, kind of like a dating app, but you're able to select people who have specific knowledge and experience, who have answered questions, vetting questions in advance. We connect you with those experts for confidential conversations in which the expert has been pre-vetted and they've signed on to terms of use, and they're able to have a confidential, rich conversation with you around your specific topic area over the platform. We then make it easy to capture that knowledge that you gained working with subject matter experts, so you can share it with your colleagues and capitalize on that learning. We strive to make it easy for you to follow up and continue to engage that subject matter expert. You can, after paying the experts by the hour through the platform, you can also pay to go exclusive with subject matter experts who you find very valuable to your project. And then over time, you can use the product to build your own private Rolodex of subject matter experts that we built up for you and others that you're already working with. And so that's really what we've built in Frontiers. And to simplify, it's really the one-stop shop for getting the GovCon expertise you need. So in terms of the results, we've had very impressive results, I think, and encouraging to us, encouraging enough to continue to invest in this area and to find ways to improve and deepen our integration with our customer workflows. So those results have shown up in the form of increased win rates, also in terms of ROI, in terms of the investment that you make paying for subject matter experts through Frontiers versus what you're getting out of that in terms of incremental wins and efficiency savings. We've also been able to show that it doesn't take that many connections and usages of the Frontiers platform to generate new incremental revenue that pays for the subscription. So I think more important than does it work is how it works. And I think that's what the remainder of this conversation with Charlie is going to help crystallize, and also why it works. What are the underlying reasons why this expert network model has been, I think, a good fit for this marketplace? Okay, so I wanted to turn it back to you, Charlie, and again, get into the how. Specifically, how have you been able to use the tool to drive results for your business?
Absolutely, Brian. I've got 3 examples that I'd like to share with everyone that I think illustrates what On Frontiers can do from a capture perspective. All 3 of these are amazing in my mind and really showed, and I liked the analogy you used. It allows you to fight at a higher weight class than you otherwise would be able to as a small business, as you'll see. But the first opportunity that I'll talk about, you want me to talk about bid, no bid, and reviewing the proposals, how we do
However you
that?
like, we can get right into the case studies, or I kind of, if you
Yeah,
want
why
to.
don't we, well, let's go on into the studies right now,
Yeah,
and then we can come back to this slide if that's all right.
that's great. Yeah, for sure.
Because these are very powerful powerful stories that are very illustrative of what On Frontiers can do for us.
Agreed.
The first opportunity I'll mention was a competitive bid that the company I work for pursued at the Department of Homeland Security. Very technical work. It was similar to work that we'd done elsewhere outside of DHS, but we really lacked information on the customer, certainly the hot buttons. We lacked information on certain technical aspects of the work and how it was performed. So we went out through On Frontiers and identified a subject matter expert. This individual, frankly, became what I would call, in my mind, a perfect subject matter expert for what we were pursuing. This was a former senior manager, retired, out of the space, knew the program because a couple years earlier he had actually managed the program himself. He had in-depth knowledge of the program and the technical aspects of the work. As an example, in the RFP, the government referenced the use of geospatial software. And my proposal team and I really scratched our heads and we were trying to figure out how in the world were they using geospatial software. It didn't seem to fit with the nature of the work at all. And we actually sat down and tried to Google something. And when you're Googling a solution in proposal world, you're in bad shape. But we were Googling, trying to figure out what it was. Talking to this subject matter expert, he knew exactly how they were using geospatial software. He knew exactly which software package they were using, even was able to point us in the direction of a user's manual and so forth. So we knew exactly how they were using this. And this becomes important later.
Hmm.
Equally important, this subject matter expert knew members of the source selection committee personally and knew what they were concerned about. So, for example, Freddie would be concerned with pricing. Anna would be concerned with quality assurance. Tom would be concerned with certain technical aspects of the work. He was able to coach us through exactly what that source selection committee would be concerned about. He actually worked with us in writing certain sections of the proposal. He also served on our color teams to give us some insight as far as how we were doing in our proposal. We won that contract. Now, after the fact, we determined there had been 47 proposals submitted, and we won. And we won, and the debrief from the government stated that we won it because they were impressed with our program knowledge and our understanding of the technical challenges of the work. And we had that understanding and that knowledge based on our relationship with the subject matter expert. To Brian's point, we still have an agreement with that subject matter expert, and in the future, if we pursue work similar to this within the Department of Homeland Security, he will be a go-to asset for us for sure. So that's the first one I can share with you. The second one's a little bit different. Can we move on to the second one? The second one comes out of Health and Human Services. And as I mentioned, I worked 5.5 years for an 8A company. And this particular opportunity was a direct award opportunity. We got a call from a contracting officer at HHS saying, look, we would like to directly award this work to you as an 8A. However, we need to have an oral presentation to make sure you understand the work and you can do the work. A lot of people think that 8As just immediately get to work. That's not the case. Normally, there's an oral presentation in which you have to tell the government, yeah, we get it, we understand the work, and this is how we're going to perform the work. In this particular case, again, this was outside of our comfort zone. The work involved some degree of laboratory support. We had a very strong teammate that did lab support work, but as a potential 8A prime, we lacked some of the expertise that we felt we needed to put together a strong oral presentation. So we went out through On Frontiers and we were able to identify a subject matter expert that had done laboratory support work, not at HHS, but elsewhere in a fashion that was very, very similar. She had other specific technical expertise that was relevant to this particular bid. and she helped develop our strategy for our oral presentation. And ultimately, she sat there and represented us in the oral presentation to the government. And again, we won the direct award. She agreed to serve as an expert for the life of the contract in case we needed to reach back to her if we ran into issues we didn't understand or things that we needed to follow up on. So again, a very successful use of On Frontiers. Third and last one I'll go over. Again, another competitive Department of Homeland Security bid. In this particular case, we were pursuing an opportunity that was larger, one that involved many more FTEs than the first two, and frankly was outside of our technical area of expertise. Again, we had a strong teaming partner in the very beginning, moving forward with this bid. But again, as a prime contractor, a small business prime, an 8A prime, we lacked some of the information that we felt we needed. So we reached out, identified a subject matter expert through On Frontiers. Again, this individual had managed the program years before. They knew the contracting officer personally. They knew the Corps personally, and was able to give us insights into their thinking. But more importantly, in this particular procurement, the government would not communicate with us. The government would not communicate directly with any of the bidders. And it was very frustrating because we were sending emails and placing telephone calls, and they were really going into a black hole. Because of his pre-existing relationship with the Corps and the contracting officer, we were able to send messaging and recommendations on how they should be released through him to those two individuals, and they responded. That we hear you, we understand, and in fact, they made changes to the procurement based on our recommendation, which is exactly what you want to do to shape a procurement. This subject matter expert was also able to refer us to a large business subcontractor that had the technical expertise necessary to help us. And we were very pleased to bring them on the team. So now we've got two very solid subcontractors technically supporting us here. It was a two-phase down select program. The first phase was an oral presentation. This subject matter expert participated with us on our behalf in that oral presentation, and we got through that control gate. The next gate is the actual proposal. But we feel very strongly that we're in a very good position to potentially win this work. And again, it's work that's much larger than we had pursued previously. But again, what On Frontiers has done in all three cases has been a powerful enabler and basically a force multiplier that allowed a small business to go after work successfully that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to win.
Thanks, Charlie, for sharing those stories. Maybe it would be good to kind of go back to that slide that we skipped over.
Yes.
And maybe find a way to kind of maybe summarize at a high level the value areas that you've seen.
Right, exactly. So, and I touched on part of this before, part of it I didn't. One value of On Frontiers is this, helps with your bid, no bid decisions. Normally what we would do with On Frontiers is we would employ the tool as part of our opportunity assessment early on. And if we got through that control gate and say, yeah, we're going to pursue this, we've got a subject matter expert or two that will allow us to pursue this work. We also use On Frontiers as part of our capture management, capture planning as well. But early on in the opportunity assessment phase, there were a number of occasions where we found out through subject matter experts, hey, the incumbent is performing extremely well. They have great relationships with the government. They've developed and deployed technologies that others in the industry don't have. Don't waste your time going after this. And we decided early on that we were going to no bid these opportunities, which basically saved us time and saved us resources because these were essentially non-winnable. Wasn't clear to us in the beginning, but with a subject matter expert providing input, it became clear we needed to hunt somewhere else.
Mhm.
Review proposal material. Each of the subject matter experts that I mentioned in these particular examples have been and were very involved in our proposal preparation. In some cases, they actually wrote limited sections of our proposal, primarily dealing with technical expertise they had that we did not. But they also sat on the color teams and kept us out of trouble. There were a number of times where they gave input saying, hey, you don't want to say it this way. You're not using the right verbiage. You're not using the right technical jargon here. And they were able to guide us on how we needed to write it. They also provided us guidance as far as the culture of the organization and how that should be reflected in the proposal as well. And then stay in touch. I want to mention that. In each case, I developed really good relationships with these subject matter experts. And over the months that we've worked together and continue to work with them, I consider them friends now. And they are part of my Rolodex. And believe me, if I'm bidding work within DHS or HHS that touch on their areas of expertise, I'll pick up the phone and give them a call. And they enjoyed what they did as well. They were both, or all three of them, very eager to help and really put their skin in the game. And they were interested in us getting wins.
That's great. I think it might be a good time to transition to some questions that have been bubbling up for me, and then we'll also give an opportunity for I'll read from other questions that have been posed. But I guess the first question relates to maybe like what were you doing before On Frontiers, right? If you've gotten this much value engaging with subject matter experts before On Frontiers, were you engaging with subject matter experts in another capacity, or what was kind of the status quo for you?
Status quo was I wasn't winning as much work. I'm not being facetious. I mean, it's a huge tool. And we incorporated On Frontiers into our routine
Mm-hmm.
capture management process. So in each case, we had to get through the On Frontiers control gate before we go forward. Now, we might go forward without a subject matter expert, don't get me wrong, but that was a major element in our decisions whether or not to pursue an opportunity or not, in most cases. But prior to On Frontiers, everyone on the call today in business development capture management knows you need to talk to the customer. You need to get them on the phone. You need to understand what they're thinking and what their needs are. But guess what? They don't answer the phone and they don't answer emails because if you talk to contracting officers, which I do offline, they'll tell you they get 100 of these calls every day and they get 100 of these emails. And frankly, after a while, they just stop responding.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not working. So then I started using my relationships with other companies doing this type of work. Do you have contact with a subject matter expert that has expertise within this particular area of DHS or this particular area of the Army or whatever the case might be? The problem with that is you're basically communicating to other companies what you're going after. You're basically telling them you have a weakness. That's not the best situation to be in. So it's a difficult situation to be in. Occasionally, you can get an incumbent to talk with you. One of the things that we would do as part of our capture planning is reach out to the incumbent staff to see if they'd be willing to talk with us. And occasionally you get a subject matter expert that way. But it's been very, very hard. On Frontiers opened a whole new vista for us
Mm-hmm.
as far as accessing this talent and information.
Appreciate you sharing that. I guess my where I think might be useful for some of our audience that maybe has considered or is considering, trying out On Frontiers is like, how does it? What are your actual best practices for using the tool? Like how do you get the most from an expert consultation? How do you build a relationship for experts? What are some tips and tricks and do's and don'ts in that area?
Well, I can tell you the process we've gone through, and it's after 2.5 years of using the tool, and we got pretty effective with it. I
Mhm.
mean, the first step is putting together a detailed, comprehensive request, basically painting a picture for your analyst of the type of subject matter expert we're really looking for. Basically, we're giving you a picture of the perfect SME for this particular opportunity. And it's got to be crafted pretty carefully. So you need to put some thought into it. You
Mhm.
need to reference the RFP. You need to reference the SAL if you have it. You need to reference any, it could be an RFI or sources salt. You need to reference that. You need to put some work behind
Mhm.
crafting this. Now, as soon as you submit that request, what has worked for me is I would follow up with the relevant documentation directly to the research analyst. So I would send the RFI or source of salt that we're responding to. We'd send the previous RFP if we could get our hands on it,
Mhm.
or a draft RFP or a draft SAL or both, whatever we had. So we knew that uh, the research analyst had the same information we had hard copy. Then I would follow up with a call to your analyst
Mhm.
and we would talk about what was sent over. We would talk about the request. And sometimes the analyst would ask for clarification. Sometimes they would ask that we adjusted our our request a little bit. But again, you're talking about a probably a 20 to 30 minute conversation where you're walking through with the analyst what that request actually entails. As the process goes on, if you develop additional information regarding the procurement, so for example, the government releases a modification, make sure the analyst gets that. If something changes as far as information you're getting about the procurement, you need to pass that over to the analyst as well. Um, and I'll say this about your analyst, Brian, and some of them I think may be on the call today. I've enjoyed working with them. Again, I've developed friendships over the 2.5 years I worked with these analysts. They got to know me and what I would ask for and what my expectations were, and I began to understand what their capabilities were as well. So
Mhm.
we were able to dance together very, very well based on doing this 4, 5, 6, 7 times together. We really worked hand in glove. The last thing I'll mention to you as far as successful use of a subject matter expert is you got to prepare for the call for the subject matter expert. Don't go in cold. Sit down 30 to 45 minutes, capture the questions that are critical to get answered. What do you
Mhm.
really need to know? And then break out from there secondary topics that you'd like to know about or that might be helpful. But again, you need to put together some thoughts about what you want to ask the subject matter expert. And it becomes very clear when you do it that way within about 10 minutes of the call whether or not it's going to be a fruitful call or not.
Mhm.
So I highly recommend
Yeah.
that. Every single expert that I've talked to out there has been more than willing to enter into a 1099 or independent contractor relationship with us to help with our proposal, in some cases, help with earlier parts of capture. Um, they've been very helpful. And as I mentioned before, they get very quickly excited about the project and they get skin in the game and they want to win as much as you do. So it's
Yeah.
from that standpoint, it's a lot of fun, but you've got to develop relationships with these
Yeah.
folks. And uniformly, I found them to be very open to that and very helpful.
Yeah, to build on what you share, and for the audience of folks that hasn't, this is a new thing or a new behavior of doing expert consultations. Our team does provide a lot of education and training on this and resources and tips and tricks, and you can find those in our on our website and in the onboarding material that we provide to new customers. One of the things that I've observed for folks that are new to this is sometimes they're not understanding how much ground you can cover in so short a period of time.
Mhm.
These are not hi, how the weather conversations. These
Right.
are the expert knows your questions in advance, has been prepped on them, should be able to, is incentivized in terms of getting paid for their time. And so they should be able to start delivering value relatively early, sometimes from the first 5 to 10 minutes. That's
And
yeah,
let me interrupt just a moment. I think this is important. Sometimes the subject matter expert tells you they don't know. That in and of itself is very valuable.
yes,
And it doesn't happen often, but it does happen sometimes that they say, I just
yeah,
don't. But you'd rather have that honesty.
absolutely. Yeah. And then I think it's interesting the story you raised on how you build that 1099 relationship, which we call going exclusive, which is a feature of On Frontiers. But that is interesting, and how you actually consider these experts friends. I've always observed in using the platform that, like, starting your relationship around knowledge transfer and a need is a powerful way to build a relationship. I mean, it just
Right.
one expert on Frontiers, James Black, I'll use as an example, as we were bidding on a proposal opportunity at one point, and I didn't know about the subject matter area. I connected with James Black through the On Frontiers platform. He is still today one of my my best friends in this space, and he's come onto our team and actually helped us as an advisor. He's trained up our analysts or our research team on federal contracting. And I just met him through On Frontiers, and so that ability to meet somebody through a short consultation around a project that you're really desperate for knowledge on, we've seen translate to lasting relationships. And I know how one of the observations I've had is how relationship based this industry is. And so, although there is a transaction here and that we're facilitating these consultations, we're actually trying to also build stronger relationships that make you stronger as a business developer and as a professional.
Well, it goes back to building your network as well.
Yeah.
We were pursuing work, and I mentioned before the Coast Guard. Very difficult environment to get into for a number of reasons I won't go into, but at any rate, you were able to identify a Coast Guard captain, retired, who
Mm-hmm.
then ended up recommending to us two other Coast Guard captains, and then finally a fourth one. We now have a whole network of Coast Guard captains, and as we pursued Coast Guard work, we were able to reach out to them. And again, that they answered the phone, and they were more than willing to work with us on a variety of different Coast Guard opportunities. So those relationships are important.
It'd be great to talk about, at the stage where you believe On Frontiers is a valuable tool and you've been using it. How do you kind of measure its success or quantify it in a way that you can bring this to your CEO or bring this to your CFO as an expense that makes sense in the coming year?
Well,
How do you communicate and see the ROI?
I mean, it's pretty easy when you get a win that's directly attributable to a
Yeah.
subject matter expert, and that's exactly what happened to us. I was able to point to the subject matter expert we got through On Frontiers, and guess what? You paid for yourself for the next 2 years.
Mhm.
Um, Same thing with the oral presentation with HHS. I mentioned before, it was directly related to what we were able to obtain from On Frontiers. But going all the way back to the beginning, and I'll share this with you. When I first talked with you about using On Frontiers as a tool, I actually went to my CEO and recommended against it. And I told her, I said, these people can't do what they say they're going to do. I don't believe it. And she actually stepped in and said, let's give it a try. Let's see how it works. And she was right. I was wrong. So again, she saw the value in it. And basically, based on the contract wins that we had that were directly attributable to On Frontiers, there was no question that it paid for itself, and the return on investment was certainly there.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to pull up, just on this topic, a slide that I've been toying with. and kind of after talking to lots of our customers and experts about like what are the pockets of value that they get from the product and how to quantify that, just looking at the way that contractors are maybe not getting the revenue that they could through their existing methods and trying to classify them a bit. And so, and we talked about some of these here, but one was, no bidding a winnable deal. Maybe this was the HHS situation where you got, and in one of the that you might not have bid if you didn't have the right expertise. I don't know. Or losing a winnable deal because you don't have the confidence. I think most of the conversations much of the cases that you talked about are in those kind of leftmost categories, no bidding winnable deals that you should have bid on,
Right.
or losing a winnable deal because you couldn't differentiate and you didn't know what the customer was interested in. But you also referred to potentially value in preventing you from bidding on unwinnable deals, right? Which
Right.
saves your resources there. And then we
Everybody's been in business development for any period of time at all, has found themselves in that situation in which you're 3 days or less to proposal submission, and you should not be there. That
Mhm,
for whatever reason, this acquisition has gone forward, this proposal process has gone forward, and you clearly don't have what you need.
mhm,
And we've all been there if you've been doing this for any period of time at all. Hopefully, it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. By employing a subject matter expert, it can become very clear earlier on, don't even attempt this. That this is too steep, or the incumbent is too well entrenched,
mhm.
or there are other competitors going after this that you just don't have the capability to compete against. Um, that can save a lot of time and effort.
Could you see, I had a couple other areas on there and just interesting you didn't mention this. I mean, could you see this tool be useful for subprime relationships of maximizing the value you get out of a subprime partnership or picking the right primes? Or if you're in a subcontractor position, is that an opportunity to use this tool?
Well, going back to the example I gave you before when I was with SAIC at the beginning of the presentation, um, had one of those small businesses come to me and said, "Oh, by the way, we've got a subject matter expert on staff as an independent contractor. He used to manage this program. He knows the Corps and he knows the contracting officer. And in fact, he wrote most of the standard operating procedures for this particular program." I would have gotten a subcontract before I
Mm,
left that building. I would have gotten a subcontract. All right. So if you're dealing with large companies out here looking to differentiate yourself from other smalls trying to sub, if you can go in with subject matter expertise, um, you'll get their attention. That is a good teaming tool.
mhm. Another question that's come up, thanks for that, is how do you embed On Frontiers into your practices? Typically you've got your team, certain tools you're using for pipeline and other tools, and if you decide on Frontiers, you're looking for a way to actually drive adoption and embed it and introduce that. Can you talk through that process and like how do you make this part of your normal way of life as a government contractor BD expert?
Well, for us, we were so impressed with the results we were getting that we made it part of our process, our entire business development capture management process. And it actually became a control gate. So at a certain point within our process, in order to move forward, you had to put out an on frontiers request
Mm-hmm.
and wait for a response. And on that basis, you could either decide to proceed with the bid, potentially discontinue the bid, and that didn't happen very often, but it was possible that could happen. Or perhaps go out and ask for clarification with another subject matter expert. But
Mm-hmm.
it was really a control gate in our CRM that in order to move forward, you had to put in a request.
That's interesting. Um, I think another angle might be helpful to think for businesses in the audience that are um, kind of considering on frontiers. Like, at what stage does it make sense to try out on frontiers or try this methodology? Like, how do you know as a government contractor that you could get value from the tool based on your business? What are the criteria? Do you know, is it after maybe losing a project that you could have won? Or what are the kind of,
I think,
what are kind of the reasons why you know that actually now is the right time to try this out?
well, I would look back at your last two or three unsuccessful bids,
Hmm.
and I would ask, why did we lose the work?
Hmm.
Do an honest assessment. Why were we unsuccessful?
Hmm.
And how could a subject matter expert could have helped us?
Hmm.
Now, for example, if it's LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable, probably a SME would not help you. Probably not. I may be wrong. They may have insight into the government's budget or pricing information, but if you lost on best value or a specific technical shortfall in your proposal, I mean, honestly, ask yourself, how could a subject matter expert have helped us here? And if the answer is it could have helped us a great deal, then again, I think at that point they need to consider on frontiers.
Could you expand a bit upon the point you made about talking to the customer? I think there's a perception for some owners and government contractors that, just talking to the customer is all you need to be doing. And do you agree with that? And is this a complement or a substitute for talking to the customer?
No, on frontiers is not a substitute for that. But as I mentioned before, oftentimes the customer is not accessible. And then the question becomes, who is the customer? Is it the program manager? Is it the core? Is it the contracting officer? Is it the OSTABU? Um, I mean, simply meeting with one of these people isn't enough. Handing them a business card, and if you're lucky, handing them maybe a one-page slick sheet, that's not enough. It's important, but what's more important is being able to get the expertise that understands what their hot buttons really are, what they really care about in this procurement. How is the incumbent really performing? If you go to the government and ask, how's the incumbent performing? Oh, doing a great job, no problems. And it could be a train wreck. Um, I think in a real sense, speaking to the government's important, but having subject matter expertise inside, if you can get it, is even more important.
And as an outsider yourself trying to break in, how do you know you have the right subject matter expert?
There's several factors. One is they can be a technical expert in a certain field, but have no knowledge of the program whatsoever, no knowledge of the contract whatsoever, no knowledge of the incumbent whatsoever. So you can get limited information from that individual and sometimes very helpful information, but that's probably not someone that you want to have a long-term relationship with for proposal purposes. Now, there's some exceptions to that, but that's sort of the general rule. But again, if they have intimacy with that program, intimacy with that component of a federal agency, knows some of at least one or two of the people involved in the acquisition, now you're cooking. Now you're in a position that, yeah, we probably want to bring this person on in a closer relationship.
And I want to talk a bit about where you apply on frontiers across your pipeline and areas, because you've got a mix of opportunities you're going after. Some of them are with agencies and buyers that you may have worked with in the past and already may have some intimacy. others who are new areas. Um, are you using, or would you recommend using On Frontiers for only the new areas or also some of the areas where you have worked with that agency in the past?
No, we used On Frontiers in every case,
Mhm.
even if we were intimate with the program, government decision makers, we'd still go out there to see who might be available.
And
Uh,
why is that if you already have some experience with that agency?
we just felt that a second or third pair of eyes on a technical solution is not a bad thing.
Mhm.
And there's a belief that incumbents uh, develop what's called incumbentitis, and they're not paying attention to what the government's really concerned about, and they're not paying attention to what their performance actually is, and they can very easily be unseated. So having that outsider giving you input is very, very valuable.
Um, that's great. I think that's all the questions I have. I guess any other final thoughts, Charlie, you want to share on engaging with experts and on frontiers?
Well, just for the folks who joined us today, and I want to make this clear, I would not recommend this if I had not had success with it. It became a gold, and it is still a go-to tool for me to attack some of these procurements as a capture manager and as a business developer. So I recommend it. I wouldn't do that unless I'd had success with it. And uh, again, I would give it a try and see how it can really supercharge some of your proposal activities and some of your bids.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for the time you spent with us. I mean, it's so great talking with you always. Thank you for trying us out. Back in the day, it was interesting for me to learn that you weren't an advocate.
Hmm.
That was news to me. It was your CEO that decided to give it a try, but I'm glad that happened, and I'm glad we're here today. And it's just been a delight talking to you about this topic.
Well, thank you very much.
And for those of you in the audience that are curious, we would be happy to show you the tool and talk about your organization and how we could potentially help you. There's a request link here, but also we'll be sharing our emails and contact information and follow-ups. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care now.